But this is essay workshop number 4. And as a reminder, there's not going to be a meeting next week on Wednesday, but there will be the following week. So the first thing that we're going to go over is some stuff about tone and voice. There's a lot of different tones that you can use in writing, in any writing. So first we have formal slash academic tone. So this is very informative, using very formal language, structured. So an example of this is the results of the experiment were unexpected, indicating a potential flaw in the initial hypothesis or methodology that warrants further investigation. So, oh, one second. So you can see that it's very factual, informative. Another example of a type of tone would be informal or conversational. So, an example of that with the same sentence kind of is, we didn't see those results coming. It looks like we need to rethink our approach. So, it's a lot more casual, informal. It seems like something that you would say to a friend rather than something that you would write out on paper. The third example we have is narrative. So, an example of this is, as we reviewed the data, it became evident that the results of the experiment were unexpected, throwing our team into a flurry of reanalysis and debate. So, in this type of tone, we're kind of trying to tell a story. We might be trying to make it more dramatic, and we'll probably be focusing on like, first this happened and then this happened and then this happened. So like first we reviewed the data and then we saw that it was unexpected and then we were in a flurry. So it seems like maybe it's something that you would write in a book or a story or something like that. Okay. Um, our fourth type of tone is persuasive. So in this style, we would say something like, the unexpected results of the experiment should compel the scientific community to reconsider established theories and embrace novel approaches. So, the key with this type of writing is that you have an argument and you're trying to persuade the audience to think in the same way. So, without some sort of argument, you can't write persuasively. So, yeah. And then the final type of tone that we're going to talk about is reflective. So, for example, reflecting on the unexpected results of the experiment, it becomes clear that scientific inquiry often leads to more questions than answers. So, in this type of tone, we're probably going to focus less on what actually happened and more on the meaning behind it, looking back at it, the bigger picture, and stuff like that. And then there's plenty more types of tone, but we're not going to get into those. These are the main ones that we're going to talk about. And before we go any further, I'm going to just briefly introduce myself for those of you if it's your first time here. So, my name is Kelly. Um, this is our fourth essay workshop so far, but we've had them on Wednesdays, just going over some writing tips and then going over some example essays. Personally, I live in Virginia. I'm a rising college freshman at UCLA. And yeah, some people that I know invited me to talk on this essay workshop, and I said that I would. So yeah. Okay, so back to tone and voice. These are a lot of different examples, and for the sake of our essays, hopefully we have kind of understood so far from these workshops that the college essays basically give you freedom to do whatever and talk about whatever, and take total creative freedom. So we're actually going to use probably a mix of all 5 of these styles of writing. So we want to be formal and academic and let the admissions officers know, reasons why they should pick us, and that ties into persuasiveness as well. We're kind of trying to persuade the person reading it that we're a good student and we're a great person. But at the same time, we also want to throw in some informal elements into it and, make it fun to read, make it interesting. And then we're also telling a story about ourselves and our lives, so we're gonna use narrative writing as well. And then finally, we probably want to show the reader some sort of like bigger picture results, which is why we would use reflective as well. And we want to show how we're reflecting and learning from our life experiences. So we would end up using all 5 of these tones and probably even more. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the persuasive style specifically, because there's a lot of different ways that you can persuade someone about anything. And some of you may have gone over this in school, but there's 3 methods of persuasion. There's ethos, logos, and pathos, which are just fancy words. Ethos is credibility or trustworthiness. So you're trying to use credibility to convince the audience that you're reliable and ethical and basically that they should believe you. Then there's also logos, which is logic or reason, using facts, statistics, and rational arguments to make your audience believe you. And pathos, which is using emotion, so appealing to your audience's emotions like sympathy, fear, excitement, etc. So, an example of each that I would highly recommend that you include in your essays. For ethos, something that could show your credibility is name dropping of specific organization or club that you are in. So instead of just saying, I like art, something that could prove that I really like art is by saying, I am the president of my school's National Art Society, which is the biggest national art society chapter that there is in this area, or something like that. So that's really using some names and showing that you are a credible person and, yeah, name dropping something. So an example of this in real life, not in, college setting, would be a company advertising their product by giving it to a famous person, a celebrity like Taylor Swift, and being like, Taylor Swift advertised our product. And then anyone who sees it would be like, wow, we trust Taylor Swift and what she says. So we're going to buy the product. So something like that. Next is logos, logic, or reason. So this one is, I think, pretty. When you think of persuasion, you might think of this. So just using facts and being like, well, I do this sport, I do this club, I am, hardworking, and using those sort of logic and being like, therefore, you should accept me into your college or your program or whatever. And then finally, pathos is our emotional appeal, and that's sort of the storytelling aspect of essays. So if you tell a really emotional story and something that you really care about, the admissions officers will probably be able to see that you're really passionate and you care a lot about the topic you're talking about, which will appeal to their ethos or their pathos. And yeah, so these are 3 different methods that you should incorporate in your essay. I recommend using all 3. So that would include, name dropping specific activities and things, giving them factual logic. Maybe you even say, like, instead of just saying, I help my community, you could say, I have over 200 hours of community service or something like that. So name dropping, putting in, facts and stats, and then telling a story and putting all of your emotions into it and really like emphasizing the story rather than just being like, well, here's my resume. Um, yeah. So those are the 3 methods of persuasion. And now we're going to talk just a little bit about figurative language, because this is another great technique that you can use in your essays and give it a little bit more of a narrative, informal, descriptive tone. And it just makes your writing a lot more engaging. So, yeah. So figurative language includes similes, metaphors, imagery, syntax, and a lot more, but these are the 4 that we're going to talk about. So a simile is a figure of speech that compares 2 different things using the words like or as. So her smile was as bright as the sun, or her teeth were sharp like knives, or something like that. And that makes the audience be able to really picture what's going on. Next style is metaphor, so a figure of speech that directly compares two different things without using like or as. So time is a thief. We're saying time is a thief even though time isn't physically, stealing anything. It's just kind of like stealing away your time or whatever. So yeah, if you take the example I used earlier, her teeth were sharp like knives, you could just say her teeth were knives, which is a metaphor. And then the third thing is imagery. So imagery is descriptive language that appeals to the senses, so like sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste, to create vivid mental pictures. So for example, the aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, its golden crust crackling with each break. So that's a really descriptive, vivid sentence, and you can practically smell the freshly baked bread in your head. And then the final style is syntax, which is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. So this one's a little bit harder to see an example of because we kind of need multiple examples to compare and contrast them. So I have 3 examples here, and they're all saying basically the same thing, and they're using basically the same words, but the order that I put the words in really changes what you're thinking about and what's emphasized in the sentence. So, for example, if I say, at UCLA, I'll participate in unique classes such as the theory of the mind, it's emphasizing the fact that I'm doing this at UCLA because I said it first, and that's going to stick out to the audience. But if I say, the theory of the mind is a unique class that I'll participate in at UCLA, that emphasizes the class and how I really want to take this class called the theory of the mind. But in my final example, if I say, I'll participate in unique classes at UCLA, such as the theory of the mind, then that's emphasizing me and my participation. So, depending on what you want to emphasize, you might want to format your sentence differently. And all of these sentences are correct, they're grammatically correct, and they're perfectly fine in whatever context. But you can be kind of strategic with it and rephrase your sentences to really make certain things stick out to your audience, which can help you a lot. Okay, so that was our little lesson, and now we're going to look at examples. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and it's going to have an example essay. So this document has all of the essays that we've looked at so far. So right now we're going to look at essay number 3, but if you want, you can look back at essays 1 and 2 if you want to. So yeah, we're all going to take a couple minutes to read over this essay, and as we do, we're going to think about what did we learn about the writer from reading this essay and what did the writer do well. So this essay talks about beauty and skincare and someone's journey from having poor skincare to being able to correct that their skin by developing some healthy habits. So starting off from the beginning, people say that inner beauty matters more than outer beauty. So this person is choosing to start off with a quote or kind of a saying that's really popular. So that is a good idea for how you want to start off your first sentence. But also, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's really hard to come up with the first sentence of your essay. It's really daunting because that's, the first sentence. So my advice for that is to not start with the first sentence. Just, start writing and then come up with your first sentence later. But yeah, this is a really good way to start with a quote or a popular saying. And then the person is saying, but when I looked in the mirror and saw my face covered with unsightly blemishes, it was hard to tell myself that. So now they're getting, they're kind of contrasting the quote with their personal thoughts. So then in these first couple sentences, we're kind of getting an idea of what the rest of this person's essay is going to be about. It's going to be about their acne and their journey with that. So if we go down to the second paragraph about this person's typical daily diet, they're listing very specific foods. So sugary cereal, salty turkey sandwiches, soda and chips, a candy bar, rice and fried noodles. And this is good because they're giving us very detailed descriptions of what they're eating as opposed to just saying, I eat unhealthy food. So they're giving us a specific list of stuff that they eat. And that can be an example of imagery, one of the things that we talked about before. And then they're saying, I never thought that my diet would be a cause for my acne, but the possibility first came to me when I was reading a skincare article. So that is kind of telling a story and it's giving that narrative tone that we talked about earlier because they're saying, what they did. First, I didn't think it would be because of this. And then I was researching and then I was reading an article and I was like, maybe that is the cause of my acne. And then if we go further and see this sentence, the websites that turned up all echoed the same message. A balanced and healthy diet is crucial for beautiful skin. So that's very factual and informative, and it's kind of similar to the academic tone that we were looking at earlier. And then they're saying they research further. Yeah, and then they're kind of just telling the story. They're giving us a lot of their personal thoughts. For example, I knew that changing my entire diet and skincare routine would require a tremendous amount of commitment and willpower. But determined to improve my skin and my self-confidence, I began to transform my lifestyle. So they're showing us a lot of like, oh, I thought this, but I also wanted this, and they're showing the challenges that occurred during this story. And they're giving us a look at exactly what they were thinking throughout the story. And then again, they show us, for a week they stuck to the diet, but then they ended up relapsing and not being able to eat super healthy. So they're also showing us challenges that occurred during their journey. But then they conclude by saying 2 years later, my skin is better. And then they conclude and then they show how they overcame the challenge. And then the final paragraph, they talk about how they don't have any awards or medals to show anything for this achievement, but they still gained a lot from this experience. And then the final sentences I really like. They say, above all, I realized that by improving my outer appearance, I had enriched my inner appearance. So that's similar to the reflective tone where they're showing, like, overall from this experience, what did I learn? And they're giving us insight into, like, the bigger life lessons that they learned from this experience. Um, so, yeah, those are some things that I personally think the essay did really well. You can see how they're using the different tones that we talked about earlier, like academic, informal, persuasive, reflective, and narrative. They're all incorporated in there at some point in some way. Um, and then something else that I think this essay shows a great example of is how you can really write about anything that you want. So they're saying like they have no awards or medals. So yeah, you don't need to write about something that you would list on your resume, like a club or a sport or anything. It can be any sort of thing in your life. So yeah, this essay does a good example of just taking like a normal life experience that someone learned something from and then turning that into an essay. Yeah, so now we're gonna move on to supplemental essays. So for those of you who haven't been to the past meetings, we've been going over both personal essays and supplemental essays. Um, we've been going through the Harvard 2024 supplemental essays just because they're a good example. But as I've mentioned before, supplemental essays tend to have very similar questions across schools. They tend to ask about like community and extracurriculars and stuff like that. And you can definitely reuse your supplemental essays from one school to the next with some editing. Yeah, so we've looked at essays 1 and 2. And now we're going to look at essay number 3. And for this, we have 2 examples. So we're going to take a minute to Well, first, the question is briefly describe any of your extracurricular activities, employment experience, travel, or family responsibilities that have helped shape who you are. So, for this, it's very broad because you can talk about so many different things. So, everyone will have something to say, and hopefully, they'll be unique. So, yeah, let's read over this paragraph. We'll take a couple minutes and then we'll come back and talk about it. So, this person is talking about policy debate. That's the extracurricular that they chose, which is great. And they start off with a quote by Jim Carrey. So, the quote is the word is yes, say it a million times, it always leads to something good. And then they're taking this quote and then they're saying, wait, I kind of disagree with it. We shouldn't always say yes. So similar to the essay we just looked at, they're starting off with a quote, which is always a good example. If the quote is relevant to what you're saying, if it, don't use a quote just for the sake of using a quote. So yeah, they're starting off with a quote and then showing how they disagree with it, and then they're explaining why they're disagreeing with it by using public policy or policy debate as their example. So they're giving us a rundown very briefly of what policy debate has taught them and how they think differently and how now they disagree with that quote. And you shouldn't always say yes. You should question everything. And then they're coming to a conclusion at the end, and then they're saying, maybe's fine. I like maybe. And this is another quote from Jim Carrey. So they're starting with a quote and ending with a quote and showing how policy debate is what made them change their mind and agree more with the second quote. So this is a great example because it's very captivating. It's easy to read and it has a really good argument in it. So we can see elements of persuasion in it. They're saying, wait, I agree with the second quote more than the first one. And they only used 135 words, so they definitely could include more detail if they wanted to. But if you've said all that you want to say, you don't have to use up your extra words just because they're there. So yeah, now this is our second example. So we're going to take a couple minutes to read this one as well, and it's for the same question. So this one is about ballet. That's an extracurricular or sport that this person participated in and that shaped who they are. So they start off with some imagery. I listen to the echoes of my panting as I sprint up and down the flights of stairs. It puts you right in the scene and it makes you wonder, why are you sprinting up and down flights of stairs? And then they answer it. They say, you might assume that I'm part of a soccer team, but I'm actually part of a ballet studio school. So they're kind of doing a plot twist. We're actually doing ballet here. And then they're explaining why they're running up and down the stairs. And they say something like brushing off my sweat. So that's really putting you in the scene and showing how hard they're working at dancing. And then they're giving some specific imagery of ballet. They're saying 3-inch long satin point shoebox, executing 16 fouettes or a saut to basque. I don't know how to pronounce that, but they're being very specific for what they're doing. And then they're showing how the PBT, progressing ballet technique class, impacted them and how they now execute jeté leaps, Sizzlinies, and triple pirouettes with ease. So they're showing how this class helped them and changed them, and now how they are stronger and they see how their sport involves a lot of strength and athletics as opposed to being just like an art. So yeah, I really like how they use imagery and how they explain something that you might not think at first. And yeah, it shows how that activity has shaped them. This one also doesn't use the full 200 words, so they could add more detail if they want to, but again, if they don't have anything more to say, then you don't need to use up those words just because they're there. So yeah, those were our examples for the day. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or ask them through the microphone. So if you don't have any questions, feel free to hop off the chat. I'll see you in 2 weeks.